Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 22 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. Recognize that we meet on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Pursuant to the order of the House, the committee is commencing its study of Bill C-10, an act respecting the Commissioner of Modern Treaties implementation. I would like to welcome our witnesses. From the Nisga'a government, we have Eva Clayton, President, and we have Brianna Poland, Legal Counsel. And from Sturgeon Lake Creek, we have Chief Sheldon Sunshine. Online, we have Vuntut Gwich'in First Nation, Chief Pauline Frost. We also have MP Billy Moore online this morning. So for those folks online, if you want my attention, use the raise hand function, please, and the clerk and I will make sure that we see you. And I just want to remind people about our good interpreters and making their life much more healthy and better. Make sure that when you're not using your earpiece, there's a nice little place to put your earpiece. Your mic, don't grab it when you speak, just because it gives feedback. And make sure your lights are off when you're not speaking. So thank you very much. And without further ado, we're going to proceed to 5-minute introductory comments from each one of our presenters. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Please take it away, President Eva Clayton.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good morning, honourable and respected members. I am pleased to be on the unceded territories of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin territory to speak in full support of Bill C-10. I am here both as president of the Nisga'a Nation as well as the co-chair for one of the co-chairs for the Land Claims Agreements Coalition. The coalition was formed in 2003 and currently includes 23 Indigenous modern treaties. The coalition came together because we were faced with common problems related to the implementation of our agreements. All of us have spent decades negotiating our treaties with the Crown and have made considerable compromises to conclude our agreements. In our case, it took many years, 27 years, to conclude our agreement in terms of the negotiations. And the Nisga'a Nation gave up ownership to more than 90% of our traditional territory in exchange for ownership of 10% of the land for the certainty that our treaty brings. However, soon after we entered into our treaty, we realized that the federal government was not equipped to implement our agreements in a timely and effective manner. In other words, our treaties were not being honored. This is why the coalition, since its formation in 2003, has spent more than 2 decades advocating for an independent oversight body to hold the federal government to account for the implementation of its modern treaty obligations. In other words, Bill C-10 is not just a government bill. We asked for it, and it was co-drafted. We want this bill, and we do not think that there are any amendments are required. Importantly, after all of these years, the commissioner that Bill C-10 will establish is still needed. Out of the 25 years with our treaty, the Nisga'a Nation assessed that it has spent 2/3 of that time in dispute resolution or litigation with the provincial or federal crowns. With no oversight body to turn to address how the federal government is implementing treaties, we have had no choice but to commence dispute resolution or litigation. For example, we have been in dispute for years now with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans because they continue to enter into agreements that have the potential to seriously impact our constitutionally protected fishing rights as set out in our treaty. Our pleas have continually been ignored despite support from other federal departments, and we had no choice but to request that our issues be arbitrated. Having an oversight body to turn to could have avoided all of this and saved the cost to both treaty partners. Its benefit was also recognized in 2008 when the Senate Committee on Indigenous Peoples, chaired by a former Conservative cabinet member, recommended that such an entity be established through legislation in collaboration with the coalition. The Liberal government recognized the need and the benefit and worked with us to co-develop Bill C-10 in 2023. We appreciate that the government of all stripes have made efforts to fix the structural federal problems that lead to poor implementation. However, these tools are aimed at improving internal coordination. These do not provide Parliament with any independent assessment of treaty implementation. It does not hold the highest level of government to account. This is why the establishment of an independent commissioner outside of the federal public service and reporting directly to Parliament is so important. The complexity and unique nature of modern treaties also require continuous comprehensive and specialized attention. There is no existing mechanism that does this. While the Auditor General has provided important reviews of various Indigenous issues, it has a broad mandate and cannot focus solely on treaty implementation. To date, that office has only conducted specific reviews on modern treaty implementation on 3 occasions. Finally, I want to emphasize that when modern treaties are fully implemented, they benefit all Canadians. For example, we are co-developing the Xylism's liquefied natural gas project on land that our nation owns under our treaty. This project is expected to bring $30 billion in investment and will create thousands of skilled careers and strengthen Canada's leadership in low-emission LNG.
President Clayton, can I just get you to wrap up? And
Okay.
We'll move to questions. You'll get more out
Sure.
when you do that.
Thank you. And we owe much of this to the economic success that certainty brings, our treaty brings certainty. In closing, I want to express my hope that all parties will support Bill C-10. All parliamentaries have a role to play in holding government accountable to the promises made in modern treaties. Thank you.
Thank you, President. And now Chief Sunshine, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Danse Kakaoyak, Kanaskamun Simantu Anuts Kagiskak. My name is Sheldon Sunshine, and I'm the Chief of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, Treaty 8 Territory, in what is now known as Northwestern Alberta. Today I speak for myself and my nation. My Niheo Cree ancestors entered into Treaty Number 8 in 1899. It is not a modern treaty. It's one of the ones referred to collectively as the numbered treaties. Amongst other things, this treaty is viewed as our consent for non-Indigenous settlement in what is now Alberta. This was recently referred to in Alberta Court, December 5th, 2025, when the Honorable Justice Colin C.J. Feasby in his decision said, First Nations consent to non-Indigenous settlement in what is now Alberta, memorialized in a number of treaties, led to the creation of Alberta and continues to confer legitimacy on Alberta. In 1930, the Crown believed it had the authority to transfer natural resources to the province of Alberta through the Natural Resource Transfer Act. First Nations were not party to this and did not consent to that. First Nations were not even consulted in any of that. In fact, It cannot be overlooked that in the 1930s, First Nations people were prohibited by law to hire lawyers or to leave the reserve lands without permission under the pass system. Our people have suffered cumulative impacts on our way of life due to resource development in our territory without receiving any share of the revenue or adequate consultation as legally required. And today we're facing an existential crisis in our treaty relationship in regards to the Alberta separatism. What is Canada, the Crown, doing to protect the treaties and our treaty relationship? So far, nothing. This brings me to Bill 10. On this, there are 3 issues I'd like to emphasize. First, Bill C-10 is for the modern treaties only. We do not object to this, so long as the First Nations with modern treaties agree with the legislation. I'm here to make sure that this particular piece of legislation will not be used as a blueprint or to be imposed on a numbered treaties. The numbered treaties are forever. Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation cautions this committee against extending any treaty implementation mechanism to historic treaties if it is confined to the Government of Canada laws, policies, or unilateral interpretations. Treaty number 8 is not derived from federal statute. It is a nation-to-nation agreement whose meaning must be grounded in what our ancestors understood and agreed to at the time of signing, informed by Nihao legal orders and oral history. Any commissioner or oversight body that prioritizes current policy frameworks over treaty law and Nihao understandings risks narrowing, freezing, or redefining our treaty rights rather than implementing them. Canada's failure with historic treaties is not administrative. It is constitutional, and it cannot be resolved by a process that asks First Nations to accept Canada's interpretation of promises that were never Canada's alone to define. Second, Canada has unfinished business with numbered treaties. We remind the federal government that the lack of effort to honorably implement the numbered treaties, Canada's one-sided specific claims process is grossly inappropriate for treaty implementation. Outside of that, litigation is our only option to get Canada moving towards treaty implementation. This needs to change. Third, the creation and development of any treaty implementation process for the numbered treaties must be done on a nation-to-nation basis. According to federal law, treaty implementation is a constitutional obligation. Despite this, there is nothing in place to ensure implementation and observance of the numbered treaties. Instead, we have seen efforts to erase or modernize numbered treaties through action plans, specific claims, so-called inherent rights policies, self-government agreements, federal legislation, management plans, or worse, pan-Indigenous meetings or initiatives. Canada seems to be using modernization as a means to an end. We do not consent. We are not looking for a new agreement, nor do we need one. Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation wants Treaty number 8 to be fulfilled and implemented the way my ancestors believed it would be, for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the waters flow. Before I close, I want to direct the committee members to the 1999 UN Special Rapporteur Miguel Alfonso Martinez, his final report titled Study on Treaties, Agreements, and Other Constructive Arrangements Between States and Indigenous Population, and I share these small excerpts from that report. Paragraph 299. The main lesson to be drawn from history concerns the problems of treaty enforcement and implementation. And paragraph 300. It is only too obvious that the problem in this area does not lie in lack of provisions, but in the lack of the failure of the state party to comply with those provisions. In closing, our message to the federal government is don't forget about numbered treaties. Implementation of our treaties is of the utmost importance. And thank you for inviting me here today. Hi.
Thank you very much, Chief Sunshine. Very much, thank you. And online, we have Chief Pauline Frost. You will have 5 minutes for a presentation.
Van Quincy, thank you, everyone. Mr. Chair and honorable members of the Standing Committee. I just want to give a context of where I'm located. I'm located in North Yukon, a small little Indigenous community of Oak Crow. 250 people reside in this community. We're a strong, resilient tribe. We live on the land. We still are actively connected to our roots and our traditions. I'm here today in strong support of Bill C-10, and I would like to emphasize the importance of a strong and effective accountability as envisioned under Bill C-10 to ensure our modern treaties are faithfully and fully implemented. For more than 30 years, Canada has been actively involved with our self-government agreements. In Yukon, we've signed an agreement 30 years ago, a modern treaty that is constitutionally protected under Section 35 of the Constitution, our agreements. They are not policy choices that can be shifted within government. They are binding commitments between the Crown and our nations. Modern treaties are intended. Our modern treaties were intended over 35 years ago to replace uncertainty and conflict with clarity and partnership. They establish defined rights, shared management structures, lawmaking authority, and fiscal management. These landmark agreements lay out how we govern together. But even with these agreements in place, significant challenges remain in achieving their full and effective implementation. Unfortunately, we see obligations and objectives unmet despite clear commitments in our agreements. Our overtime implementation can stall. Responsibilities become blurred, priorities shift. However, we continue to push for full implementation, respect, and honoring of our agreements. We do not want to revisit the past, but we want to ensure that we look towards the future together with Canada. Our agreements were clearly drafted over many, many years. They reflect decades of negotiations and compromise. We are not seeking anything beyond good faith implementation of what was already agreed to in our 28 chapters of our self-government agreement. This is why accountability mechanisms are so important. Are kept, and our agreements are upheld as they were originally envisioned by our ancestors. With accountability, we have predictability. It creates transparency and clarity. Bill C-10 strengthens this accountability framework. Implementation challenges early, it safeguards mutually beneficial opportunities and reduces risk of costly disputes like the legal disputes that were mentioned by my colleagues. These are a function as envisioned rather than being symbolic documents. Our nation, accountability ensures that harm to inaction or political or administrative shifts. Strong accountability mechanisms actually protects the Crown. They create clarity around roles and timelines. They reduce uncertainty in our traditional territories. They reinforce the principles that treaty relationships are enduring in our nation-to-nation relationship. It is not good governance. It is the honor of the Crown in of this legislation. The provisions reflected were not drafted unilaterally. They are the result of sustained dialogue. Modern treaty partners, our nation, along with others, sat at the table. We brought forward our experiences and worked through technical detail. We arrived at language that carefully reflects the balance. Co-development must mean something. If Indigenous governments engage in good faith, invest time, resources, and reach consensus with Canada, that outcome should be respected by Parliament. It reflects our shared understanding of how to improve accountability while respecting the original spirit and intent of our modern treaties. They establish Indigenous governments as lawmaking authorities. They provide predictability for economic and infrastructure development while advancing reconciliation. In the North, they are reinforced Canadian Arctic sovereignty. They reinforce the sovereignty priorities of Canada. When Indigenous governments are recognized and empowered as partners, Canada's presence in the Arctic is strengthened. I want to close by recalling a foundational principles of our self-government agreement, that our government has the authority to govern our own affairs in order to preserve our culture, manage our land, and provide for our citizens. That principle reflects a vision of partnership, one in which we as a government have our rights, jurisdictions accountable to our citizens working alongside Canada and Yukon. Bill C-10 is a practical step toward ensuring half of Funtaguch, and I urge
Thank
that
you.
this committee support C-10.
Thank you very
Once
much,
again, thank you.
Chief Frost. We're getting, our technical people are saying there's just an issue with the Wi-Fi connection coming out, so that you were a little choppy. I think we got the gist, but can you send those remarks to us too as well? I think that the clerk may have them, that we can distribute them. But just to note that it seems to be a Wi-Fi connection issue, so we're going to try and work through that to make sure that we can get your answers to the questions that are coming up in this round. And we're going to move to questions now, and you'll be able to bring things out as we speak. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll get that to you.
Deputy Gill, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie. En fait, je souhaitais
Mr. Chair, thank you. I simply wanted to intervene because interpreters mentioned on several occasions that there were interruptions, and you also noticed that. So it was difficult for the interpreter because it was difficult for me to hear the entire speech. Maybe we can ask the witnesses to respond in writing because we were not able to follow the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please have all our witnesses just send out your remarks to us. Some of you have, some may not have, but that would be excellent to have. And this will give us an opportunity to delve into that even further. But now we're going to go to a round of questions. Now, for 6 minutes, each party will have an opportunity to ask. We'll start with the Conservatives, and we have, I believe, MP Moran online. Please take it away.
Thank you, Chair. How's my audio?
I got thumbs up from the committee.
Thank you. Thank you to our guests for coming today, Chiefs, President. I'm going to start with Chief Sunshine first. Chief, thank you for your testimony today and coming to Ottawa. Note that I am at AOTC, so maybe I'll see you here in the next couple of days if you hurry home. So it'd be good to see you in person too as well. Chief, you mentioned a few principles in terms of modern treaties, unfulfilled treaties when it comes to 1 to 11. Would it be your position that treaties are a foundational document to the country of Canada?
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for the question. Good to see you. And yes, I'll be there tomorrow morning, flying out tonight. I think we all know the history of Canada and how it began and how the First Nations of Canada welcomed settlement into our territories. And it's always been through peace and friendship. And First Nation people have been very good treaty partners, and we haven't been reciprocated that same on government's part. When it comes to the foundational agreements, that is the reason why we have Canada. That is the reason why we have the provinces. It was because of those peace and friendship treaties that allowed that to happen. And you know, when I sit here and I think about different treaties, modern, historic, some of these things, they're dealing with these things for 26 years. You know, and we're dealing with things that happened 125 to 150 years ago, and they call them historic treaties, but for us, they're yesterday, passed on by stories, oral history from our elders and our ancestors. We deal with the impacts of what's been the failures of the Canadian government to uphold those responsibilities as we understand it. You know, we have to stop looking at the written text and thinking that that's what was understood at the time, because it's false and it's wrong. And dealing with those impacts. I'm talking to my sister here from the West Coast, and some of the strides that they're making in their communities because of that treaty and some of the responsibilities upheld in their document. Yet they're still finding challenges, still here wanting a commissioner to uphold the government to their responsibilities. So we have a long way to go. And I think today we have the greatest opportunity to correct those, not only because of the long-standing issues with treaty are the responsibility, but with all the outside forces that are affecting us, the separatism in Alberta, the things happening south of us. And today is the greatest opportunity for us to change that for the better. I hope I answered your
Thanks,
question.
Chief. You did. And I got just a quick follow-up for you, if you don't mind. Treaties predate provinces in this country, notably in 1 to 11. Are you aware that there's a treaty commissioner office well, Treaty 8, first of all, covers Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC. I think NWT too. I stand to be correct on that, but I'm pretty sure it's NW. Yeah, it is NWT. Are you aware that there's a treaty commissioner office in Saskatchewan?
Yes, I am.
Have you ever had any interaction with that office?
No, I haven't. From what I understand, that they're more of an educational piece. I'm not sure on what what authority that they have in persuading government to uphold their treaties, but I know Saskatchewan is having the same issues all across treaties 1 to 11, the failures of upholding the treaty from our understanding.
Well, treaties predate provinces. There's a commissioner that's been in place for quite some time in Saskatchewan. It sounds like you haven't had much interaction with them. Does it give you a lot of faith in terms of creating a new commissioner's office for the communities who represent modern treaties, or do you think this one still will probably have a long way to go before being effective?
It's like we don't oppose like modern treaty or a modern treaty commissioner. I think we welcome it if it works for the modern treaties. The thing that we want Canada to understand is that you're going to create a two-tiered system when it comes to treaty. We know that the agreements that they have with modern treaties are very comprehensive. And when you take a look at Treaty Number 8, I think it's 3 pages. And, I know the vagueness of some of those commitments that are contained in the text and the reliance of the Government of Canada, or regardless of who's in power, sticking to that treaty text. But that treaty text is not the understanding. The true intent and inherent meaning of treaty was to share the land. When we talk about how my friends on the West Coast are flourishing in their nations, and yet we look all across Treaty 8 territory and there's struggle. There is a crisis in every aspect of our nations, and that's a direct result of the lack of treaty commitment on behalf of the government. And it's pretty simple. We have to get back to what that means for us. What was the intent at the time of signing a treaty? And so if there's ever any commissioner for treaty 1 to 11, then it has to come from that understanding. It can't follow policy framework of modern legislation and policy today. We have to go back to that understanding of what was committed to at that time. We want to be fair to the government of Canada. One of the things that that really stand out in my mind is that we understand the need for change in the economy. We understand the need for better systems. We know that firsthand. And we want to be part of it, part of the solutions. And yet, when things happen, like Bill C-5, when it's passed in like 6 weeks, and yet First Nations are thought of as an afterthought, and that has to change.
Thank you very much. And we are going to go to our next questioner, and Jaime, for 6 minutes, please.
Yes, I'd like to thank the witnesses for their discussions this morning around treaties. And I've heard Chief Frost and Ava Clayton talk about looking at the modern day treaties of more than 25 years and 30 years, and listening to Chief Sunshine talk about a treaty of at least more than 150 years since its signing. And then as a Mi'kmaq person, to be celebrating the 300th year of our treaties with peace and friendship. There's a wide range of how treaties have unfolded in this Canada. And one thing that we can all agree on is that they're foundational documents that have led to the creation of this country. But I think one thing that we can all agree on as well is that we need to find better ways to implement it, whether it's 300 years, whether it's 180 years, whether it's 20 or 30 years. Now, I have to commend the modern treaty nations who've said, you know, these things that we've signed between 25 or 30 years ago aren't working out as well as we would like. And instead of going to litigation, as many of us as nations all across Canada have done, that are costly, timely, you're taking a new approach. You're saying, you know, if we have a modern day treaty commissioner, maybe we can figure out what are the differences, what are the things that we're not happy with, and create some kind of oversight, accountability, and action from government. And I applaud them for that. Ava, my first question would be to you is, if we can get this legislation across, if we can get a modern treaty commissioner in place, what would be an example of things that you think you would be able to bring that would help be resolved with a modern day treaty commissioners in place that we can't do currently?
Thank you for the question. One good example is the issues that we continue to face with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We should have been able to go to the Commissioner's office to say we need this help. We need to make sure that DFO understands the treaty. DFO understands that it's a constitutionally protected treaty, and that we have a responsibility to bring these issues to the Commissioner. That way we're not faced with dispute resolution going over 10 years. We're now faced with arbitration. But if we had the Commissioner, that would have been great. That's just one example.
So you'd see this as a way to skip all of the court proceedings, the filings, all of the years of, you know, trying to fact find and all of the stalls in the justice system. You'd be able to go to someone, they'd be able to potentially go to the ministers provincially and federally and say, hey, this is part of the treaty that's there for the last 30 years, and we believe that you're not upholding it, and there's a problem here, and we need action on that. Is that your understanding?
Because it's a huge problem. There's no consultations with the for example, in terms of what they're doing with getting into agreements with other nations that really impact the Nisga'a Treaty rights.
Now, I've heard this framed in the House by Conservatives as needless bureaucracy, that you guys have mechanisms which you can do anyway to get these treaties upheld. Is that something that, do you think, is that a valid argument?
No, we don't see it as a added bureaucracy. We see it as an independent body. Perhaps I would like to have my colleague who is involved with the technical work related to the administrative end of things. Brianne?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So, yes, we don't see this as an added layer of bureaucracy. As President Clayton said, it's an independent agent of Parliament, and there's currently internal processes that the federal government has established, like DMOC, the Deputy Minister's Oversight Committee, but those are really towards the internal coordination of the federal government. Because one of the key challenges is there's no internal coordination. You have one interpretation from one department, and then on the same provision, there's a completely different interpretation from another department. So there's no way for Parliament to obtain independent assessment of how modern treaties are being implemented. So the agent of Parliament is separate, so we don't see it as an added layer of bureaucracy as it's reporting directly to Parliament.
Do I have time to ask Chief Frost for an example of how she believes this modern day treaty commissioner could be utilized by her nation?
You just did, and you have 1 minute to answer, Chief Frost.
Self-government agreements in the Yukon. We have 11 self-governing modern treaty groups in the Yukon. It's critical and essential that we have, collaborative streams we go to. We want to be able to go to one window, one door with Canada.
Chief, you're still breaking up a bit. You, in writing, perhaps, Chief, you could respond to as well, because you're still breaking up a bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And Deputy Gill, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes, MP Gill. Thank you, Chair. I would like to find out if technical sound tests were done prior and subsequently if there was a problem during the test. This is an intervention on behalf of interpreters and those speaking French. Thank you all for your testimony. As Ms. Clayton said before, there's no amendment required for the bill. As we know, it was co-developed. Are you hearing? I thought sound tests were done. Testing, can you hear the interpretation? Can you hear the interpreter? Can you hear the interpreter? Mr.
This is time for Madame Gill, but we're just suspending for a minute while we do this, and we'll start from the top.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Our language and identity are important for everyone. Thank you for being here and for testifying. I was repeating what Ms. Clayton said concerning the fact that the bill was co-developed, so everyone was in agreement. The targeted First Nations and the government counterparts. The Bloc Québécois is in favor of the bill, and Ms. Clayton said that there was no amendment required in her opinion. I imagine that is the same for the other witnesses. So this reduces the questions we have to ask if everyone is in agreement. I have a general question which may demonstrate our interest in the bill when it comes to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. How can C10 ensure, because very often we know that governments have to be encouraged to act or react. So how can this bill help respond to the obligations of the government when it comes to implementing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People? So I'll allow you all answers, either Ms. Clayton, Chief Sheldon, and the lady on the line, whose name I forget.
The question in relation to UNDRIP, the advocacy for the CMTI began long before UNDRIP was signed and is not directly tied to Canada's UNDRIP responsibilities. Canada's signing and implementation of this international instrument was a positive step forward for the recognition of the rights of all Indigenous people. UNDRIP provides the floor, not the ceiling, when it comes to the state's recognition of the Indigenous rights. And UNDRIP builds upon Section 35 of the Constitution, which already protects the modern treaties. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Je ne sais pas si ma question a été bien comprise. En fait, je demandais.
I don't know if my question was well understood. I was asking if there was an additional step.
One here.
Thank you very much for the question, and Mr. Chair, if I may answer. So there's an article in UNDRIP that provides for the recognition and upholding treaties. So the commissioner is again tied to Section 35 and upholding modern treaties, but it does in fact tend to upholding as well as UNDRIP, because Article 37 provides for the full implementation of treaties as well. So thank you.
Answer? Or
What they said.
what they said? Ditto. Okay. Okay. Je comprends. Perfect. Okay. Chief
Merci,
Frost.
Monsieur le Président, pour...
Thank you, Chair. For Ms. Frost, does she want to respond?
Yes, I'd love to respond. I just would like to highlight that UNDRIP sets a minimum standard that should meet Indigenous rights. However, water treaties are protected under Section 35 of the Constitution from 1982, and as such, and unlike UNDRIP, modern treaties have the force and effect of law in Canada, and the role of the Modern Treaty Commission will be to ensure legal obligations contained in modern treaties are fully and effectively implemented in a timely manner and with the spirit and intent in which the parties entered into them. So I see, as President Clayton advised, it's a floor, not the ceiling. Modern treaties give us certainty, and that's what we look for. Merci.
Oui, peut-être conclure. En fait, je pense que...
I think my question was also not well understood. I simply wanted to say that it was an additional layer for First Nations when we have a commissioner that will ensure implementation of the treaty. That would be all, Mr. Chair.
Schmiel for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much to our witnesses, and good to see everyone again. As we spoke about before in person, the concerns we have with this piece of legislation is the consequences piece. We agree that governments of all stripes over hundreds of years has failed to live up to the word of treaties, whether historic or modern or otherwise. We agree with that. We agree that there needs to be fundamental change within the government departments. We agree with that. We agree that an extra oversight body does add some additional oversight. But at the same time, we talk about officers of Parliament. Well, the Auditor General is one. We've had, I can't tell you how many reports that have outlined, I can't tell you how many issues with the government and Indigenous peoples. We've had, I can't tell you how many studies in this committee. In my time, I've been on this committee for 6 or 7 years now. We've done multiple studies on Indigenous policing. We've done multiple studies on food prices in the north and how they're out of control. We've done multiple studies on housing on reserve. We get reports back showing that, yes, funding is increased, but the improvements made do not match up. So we have all this information in front of us and nothing seems to change. There seems to be no consequences. So now we're creating a new officer of Parliament that is going to come up with a new report. And there are many ways to criticize, absolutely. Where is the enforcement piece? That's our concern. Will there be any changes? We want to see the government live up to the word of its treaty. Will we get there with this? Chief Sunshine, Chief Clayton, or their legal friend? What's that? We're going nowhere. We've got nothing.
Thank you. I think that would be best answered by the Modern Treaty folks, as this is a commissioner for them.
and ready to go here. She looked like she was taking notes.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, MP Smale. And I want to highlight what you talked about, multiple studies. This isn't about studies. It's about accountability. And it's about holding all of us accountable to the agreement that we made. Nothing to do with studies, everything to do with implementation
If I can
of
just
the
quickly, the
provisions
point,
of
the link with
treaty.
the studies was about the fact that more information continues to be put on the table and nothing seems to change. Studies, reports, it's all, there's a ton of it. Ton of information was where I was trying to get to.
Okay, well, thank you for the clarification, but still, it's all about accountability. I will do the one piece and I'll turn it over to my colleague in terms of enforcement. But yeah, the Auditor General has a specific mandate for the government, for Canada. There's no specific mandate of the Auditor General for modern treaties. I think that will be my answer to your question. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, okay. I do have a follow-up to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. So I think we need to go back to the purpose of the Commissioner itself, is to provide oversight, credible and independent information to Parliament. So the enforcement blurs that line. If an agent is now responsible for enforcing their own recommendations, it blurs the independence of that agent. And ultimately, it's up to Parliament to make sure that those recommendations are implemented. So what is interesting about the Commissioner is that on the other side, you have your modern treaty groups who will be reviewing every report that comes out and can even ask the Commissioner to undertake investigations. And those investigations will come directly to Parliament and to this committee. So it's the committee who will be able to review them and ensure that the recommendations are implemented. And speaking for President Clayton, and I hope I don't get kicked under the table, but the modern treaties, of course, will be taking those reports and implementing them as well, because that's the point of the Commissioner, is that's independent to both Parliament and to modern treaties. So we'll be implementing the
Thank you.
recommendations as well.
That's all the time we
I
have.
don't think your glasses are working, Chair. There's an extra
I got
couple
my-
minutes
I got
there.
my
I'm
helper
just
there,
gonna,
so,
okay,
yeah,
all right,
so-
all right.
No, it's that's the time we had. But you can follow up with anything in writing too, as well, if you want. That's good. So next we have Philip for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. And if I have the will of the committee, I'm going to convey some of my time to the representative from the NDP, Lori.
Is it the will of the committee? I got a thumbs up, and we're okay over there.
Thank you.
Okay.
So my question is going to be directed to President Clayton. Nice to have chatted to you before committee. And to all the witnesses, thank you for being here today. I heard you in your earlier testimony talk about how important C10 is, that you support it. I'm preoccupied a little bit with the consultations that were done between government and the modern treaty holders. Can you tell the committee about your journey in this regard and your own experience as it relates to the consultation and why it's so important to implement C10 now?
Thank you for the question. It's so very important for the Bill C-10 to go through, simply because we've been living, as I've set out the example, that under the Nisga'a Treaty, there has been no consultations from Canada in regard from the various departments when it comes to speaking with other Indigenous groups. And I want to give one key example is that with the negotiations of new treaties, Canada, without consulting with the Nisga'a, added a piece of our territory to be negotiated. And that's just not right. And I think it's important when we look at how those consultations will work. And the Commissioner will come up with a consultation policy when it comes to that. The other area is in regard to mining. There is a piece in the mining that, whether it's BC or Canada, that the mining companies and the exploration companies have to consult all Indigenous groups within the nation. There's no consideration of the treaty-protected lands when they issue those consultations. So that happens as well. That's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Laurie, you have 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Thank you.
And thank you so much to the witnesses. Just to, I think, create clarity about this important study that the NDP supports, I think that what we need to understand is the difference between policies and what governments study as policies and what Indigenous peoples, the modern treaties, are talking about, which are rights. I think that's where the differences are. And I wonder if you agree with me that this is C10 is about making sure that rights are being upheld through the commissioner's role, and whether there are other bodies that help to make sure that rights are being upheld through nonpartisan ways or through an independent way. And I wonder if you can share your responses to that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Laurie. Yes, it's so very important for the rights of the treaty, for them to be respected. Those rights were negotiated in each of the agreements that modern treaties hold, and they have to be upheld. And the Commissioner will assist the modern treaties in doing that. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. And I just want to to add to President Clayton on Section 8 of the bill itself provides the mandate of the Commissioner, and it clearly says that 8B, that 8A is strengthening the relationship with Indigenous peoples, but also 8B is fulfilling the Government of Canada's obligations under and achieving the objective of modern treaties. These obligations and objectives being interpreted in a broad and purposive manner. And I think that's an important piece, because the courts have often said that when you look at modern treaties, you have to look at them in a broad and purposive manner, and also implement them within the spirit and intent that they were drafted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that brings us to the end of your time. So thank you very much. And now we will go to Deputy Gill for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One last question, and I would do something else. What will be the consequence of not quickly adopting this bill? What will be the consequences on First Nations people?
As for me? Thank you. I will respond first. It's a two-part answer. The consequences for not having a commissioner, we will continue to be faced with dispute resolutions. We will continue to be faced with court action, and it would be best for all parties to the treaties if we had that commissioner, so that we can avoid all of the added costs of dispute resolution and the courts. Brianne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think also the importance, just the President Clayton gave an overview of the consequences, but also this bill was fully co-developed with modern treaty partners. So this was just a great example of reconciliation in action, and how modern treaty can be upheld is through the full co-development of this bill. So I think that would be an unintended consequence, is that the work that was done directly with the federal government is not respected and implemented.
Dernière question, je sais pas si Madame Clayton.
One last question, Ms. Clayton or Ms. Sunshine. What are the principles that the courts have constantly reminded us of, which will apply here as well?
Oops. Madame Clayton ou Madame Paulin. Désolée, je l'ai dit en
Ms. Clayton or Ms. Frost?
For the principles that the courts have for us, really none, because that's the other aspect of the commissioner would do. The courts have no knowledge of the treaties. There's been no education to the courts of law when it comes to the treaties in terms of understanding the nature of the treaties and the authorities of the treaties. There is none. Brianne?
Thank you very much. That just brings us to the end. You can, again, submit in writing to answer the question even further. Next, we have MP Schmale for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you again to our witnesses. All right. So what we're trying to do here on this side is, like I said, we agree with the issues you have. Where we want to try to improve this legislation so if it passes, when it passes, it achieves everything you want it to achieve. Again, where we see there is a shortfall is the enforcement part of it. As I said before, we have tons of information as to where the government of all stripes over hundreds of years has failed Indigenous peoples. They haven't lived up to their word of the treaty yet. The Auditor General is an officer of Parliament, an agent of Parliament. They have tabled those reports. It's when we're in power, the media, it's in the headlines for a few weeks. The Liberals, a couple of days, a couple hours maybe. The point is, what will change? I know they're going to focus specifically on treaties. I get that. When they release the report of where the failures are, when or how do we see progress other than a report at the next cycle showing there is no progress?
Again, a very short answer from me, but two-part. Thank you for the question, MP Schmale. When or how the enforcement will work, I think it's important to note that it'll be the commissioner's job to do that, not the Auditor General, as I spoke about earlier. The Auditor General has a responsibility to the government for Indigenous people, not necessarily the modern-day treaty groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for the question. And again, I'll just reiterate my earlier answer as well in terms of enforcement is that, the purpose of the commissioner is to have the oversight and an agent of Parliament that's independent. So again, the reports are coming directly to Parliament and this committee. So it's also up to Parliament to implement those recommendations. And what the commissioner will do is provide that independent view of how the federal government is undertaking its modern treaty activities. So just one example is, as President Clayton said, there's many disputes with the Department of Fisheries of Oceans, of other departments, where we have one interpretation and the federal government has another interpretation, and that interpretation stands. So there's no one that we can turn to and say, what does this obligation actually mean? And those reports are going to be invaluable to us because modern treaty implementation is a day-to-day exercise. Like, we are implementing treaties every day. So it's going to be invaluable to modern treaty partners, to the federal government, and it will enhance the relationship and the implementation of those treaties.
But wouldn't it be fair to say if the government is signing on the dotted line that they are going to live up to the word of the treaty, they actually do it? So if we're continuing to sign these treaties, and yet we have so many that have gone that haven't been lived up to, there's been failures along the way. I still don't see the government, again, politicians will sign, there'll be a big ceremony, and then the failures will happen after that. So it seems to me politicians, the departments themselves, seem to be failing in terms of living up to this treaty. But if they fail, there are no consequences. There are no, other than being named and shamed, what happens?
And just to note, MP Schmil, Chief Frost had her hand up. Would you like her to take a shot at it too, if you don't mind?
I didn't
No, I just
see her
noticed it.
picture, so I wasn't sure if she was still on.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I just want to highlight that when we speak about enforceability of the C10, I think the accountability rests with parliamentarians. It doesn't rest with one government in power. And that's, I think, the objective here. We have the responsibility for implementation, the recommendations that come out. The objective is independence right here. And so ultimately, Parliament will oversee the ministers, which essentially will be responsible for the action. So it's up to the parliamentarians. It wouldn't go to the government in power. That's what we're trying to get at with
Parliament's job is to hold the executive branch to account, right? It will be the executive branch, for the most part, to implement any legislation that is passed by Parliament. At most time, it's usually the governing party leading the way, unless the opposition manages to get together in a minority situation to make that happen. Having said that, it will be the executive branch that actually implements this. What punishments do we have to make that happen?
That brings us to the end, but if you could submit that in writing to the committee, we would appreciate that very much to all of you if you want to take an opportunity. So thank you. Okay, so for our last round of questioning, we have MP Levesque. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Bonjour à tous, merci beaucoup.
Good day, everyone. Thank you very much for your testimony today. Let's go deeper on the mandate of the commissioner. We made reference to Section 8, which talks about the mandate to independently assess all activities and ensure implementation of all the treaties. In your opinion, what will be the commissioner's priorities when it comes to implementing the treaties as they set up their office and their mandate or powers?
Thank you. I'll be very brief again and then turn it over to Brianne, because the committee must understand that all technical work on Bill C-10 has been conducted by the LCAC project technical team. One of the matters in terms of the commissioner's first opportunity is to do a meet and greet with all of the modern treaty groups, and then learn to understand all of the treaties. When you think about the provisions of our treaties, they are, although they're not cookie cutter agreements, but the issues for the commissioner will be the same, and that's the first priority for the commissioner, to understand the obligations of that office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. And the commissioner will be able to set their own priorities as well to maintain that independence, so they can undertake their own reviews and investigations. And the modern treaties partners can also submit requests for investigation, as well as the minister. So I think that's very important, is that they will be able to set their own agendas as well, in determining their priorities. But they will, and the bill does specify that when appointing a commissioner, their expertise and knowledge of modern treaties also has to come into consideration before their appointment. So that's going to obviously help them determine what priorities and what are the urgent questions that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Merci. J'aimerais poser la même question.
Thank you. The same question goes to Chief Frost. It's a pleasure to see you once again. We saw each other at the Yukon on the screen last week, so it's a pleasure to see you once again. You can also answer the same question.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think about the commissioner with respect to priorities. If we think about our modern treaties, there's a review period. So we review our agreements efficiencies every 5 years. So there's an obligation to set priorities on what's working and what's not working for us. So we go through various departments within Canada to negotiate elements of our effective implementation of our agreements. That has to be done in good faith and through a collaborative approach. So When we set the priorities, modern treaty partners need to be at the table and ensuring that urgent matters are brought forward. But with respect to the priorities, that needs to be determined, and the numbers and frequencies of audits and reviews protecting independence from political direction. So trying to create an independent, autonomous oversight. That's really important. As you can imagine, we go to many different doors to negotiate effective implementation of elements of our modern day treaties. We want to be able to go to one door, consistent interpretation, and I think in our view, we see it as reconciliation and action. True implementation reflects our Crown Indigenous relationship.
Puis une dernière petite question. Donc, selon vous,
One last question. So, in your opinion, will the signatories of the modern treaties need increased capacities or resources to really work with the commissioner?
I believe so. I mean, the objective is that we have an obligation. If you think about my little community of Oak Grove, it's not a Vantabuchan only community. Canada has residents in the community, citizens of Canada living in our community. You think about the elements of our agreement that speaks to ensuring that every citizen is treated equal to that of other Canadians. Our obligations and commitment to Canada is to work collaboratively on all of the targets of government in power, right? We think about sovereignty in the north, think about geopolitical pressures, you think about 30 by 30 obligations, you know, your greenhouse gas emission targets, you think about clean future. All of it will not happen without your partners at the table. Modern treaty commissioner will help us to oversee that, but the treaty partners also have an obligation to commit. So it's not just rests only on Canada. This also rests on the modern treaty holders. We have an obligation to come to the table in good faith to have these conversations and discussions about efficiencies and effectiveness on balancing the economy of Canada, balancing program services for all citizens, and ensuring that we essentially come to the table with as accountable governments, right? That's our objective.
Thank you very much. MP Morin, go ahead. You had a couple questions.
Thanks, Chair. Could you just clarify how much time I have?
2.5, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'll go to Chief Frost. A part of the clarification piece in this act says, for greater certainty, a review or performance audit provided for in this act is not a substitute for a dispute resolution process provided for in a modern treaty and an agreement referred to in Section 3 or an act that implements a modern treaty. I share my sentiments with my colleague, Mr. Schmale, about the actual power of this bill in this office. Again, I wholeheartedly agree with the challenges of every First Nation and modern treaty holder that were stated here today and beyond. But I'm still having trouble what the actual power is and what will actually change. So if it's 5 years from now and this office turns out reports like the Auditor General, because I do believe it's structured principally in the same way, with no ability to actually act on these things and hold the government to account, how are you going to feel in 5 years if that's the case?
Okay, let's think about it in this way. The C10 was co-drafted. We co-drafted, and we also, because we co-drafted, we commit to being partners with Canada, right? So as we look at the review period, our agreements require us to review our agreements every 5 years around efficiencies. And in reviewing those agreements, we also identify the flaws. But with regards to implementation, I think that and efficiencies and clarification, as you highlighted, that needs to come from our partnership arrangement. And we don't want to ever get caught in litigation. The most effective way to resolve dispute is by having partner-to-partner conversations. So modern treaty implementation allows for that to happen. So I'll maybe turn to Brianna. Maybe she has a direct answer to that question with respect to litigation. But for me, as self-governing modern treaties in the Yukon, we have 11 of the 26. So we have 30 years of experience. We have many opportunities to resolve disputes, and we try to do it in a Crown Indigenous relationship conversation without going to the courts to find dispute, because that's costly. It takes years, and it takes time and resources, and it takes away resources from our own people in implementing program services. So we don't want to do that. We want to look at a process that works effectively.
I just want to iterate that I do share your sentiment, even for the historic numbered treaties and across Canada, all the way to the Maritimes and North each coast, that I want to stay out of litigation, but I still fail to see how this changes the path of staying out of litigation, quite frankly. It's just my personal opinion.
Thank you very much, and we're going to go to Jaime for 2.5, 3 minutes.
And I think that one of the things that we can all agree on here is when we're talking about treaties, whether they're modern, numbered, historic, they're all protected by the Constitution of Canada. Section 35 of the Constitution recognizes and affirms all existing treaties. Section 52 of the Constitution of Canada goes further to say that the Constitution is the supreme law of Canada, that any laws that are inconsistent made by provincial governments, municipal governments, are inconsistent. And so when we talk about studies and we talk about the parliamentary reports and we're talking about this and we're comparing them to the treaty rights, I think that's two completely separate conversations. And I understand this as looking at the constitutional basis for this country's existence and a approach by the modern treaty commissioners, modern treaty nations, to say we need a tool to ensure that these constitutional rights are upheld. And I think that's a vastly different argument from housing, policing, other things around health. Would you agree with that statement that we can't be looking at the implementation of treaties in the same context of the administration of the Indian Act? I'd like to get anyone who wants to comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. Yeah, absolutely. So modern treaty, the Indian Act doesn't apply to modern treaty groups. And just to your comments, I think that's the issue, is that the federal system is just not set up, frankly, to implement treaties. There's over 8,000 obligations in these agreements, and they cut across all departments. So the accountability that I will bring, and to MP Morin's earlier question, is that whenever there's an issue with interpretation or implementation of an obligation, there's no other choice but to turn to litigation dispute resolution. But if we have a separate independent commissioner who can provide their views on what this obligation means, what the treaty means, then that provides another avenue to avoid having to go to dispute litigation, which is really not to the benefit to anyone. It's very costly. So to answer your question a bit more broadly than I think you intended, but yes, so agreed about the Indian Act, it doesn't apply, and also the commissioner is really there to ensure that those modern treaties are fully implemented as intended.
I see President Clayton nodding her head. Would you agree with the overall context of that question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Chief Sunshine, I don't know if I have too much time, but if the modern day treaty commissioner proves to be effective at implementing treaty rights for those nations, would you not see this as something that is innovative, an approach that other nations could look at?
You have about 15 seconds.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. You know, it's something I would remind the government is that while that might work for modern day treaties that deal with modern day legislation and policy, again, we have to go back to the signing of treaty and the understanding of what that is, what that means to us, like I said, and it's two different things. And so what we're afraid of happening is having a two-tiered treaty system where we have the modern treaties with their commissioner that's instituting the agreement that's the negotiation took a long time and they're fixed and they're capped, right? And so when we're talking about the historic treaties, Treaty 1 to 11, those are separate, distinct treaties that have to be taken in that context.
Thank you. And again, feel free to follow up in writing. The study will go on for a little bit, so feel free to respond to questions further, or again, just to send in written briefs on stuff that you were thinking about that you think would help this committee. So I really, really appreciate all of your testimony. It was very good. Thank you to our committee members. And very quickly, before I ask for adjournment, I'd like to ask the following questions of the committee as it relates to two budgets, which have already been circulated to the committee. Budget has been prepared for the study of Bill C-10 in the amount of $56,400. Mover, someone move. Okay, approved. Everyone got nodding heads. Okay. One more. A budget has been prepared and circulated for the study of issues related to the Indian Act registration in the amount of $58,600. Moved. And all in favor? Okay, both are carried. And now permission to adjourn. Yeah. Okay. We're adjourned.